Okay, evening. As Danny rightly said to me before we started here, we're complete amateurs. We don't know what we're doing, and you probably don't know who we are except for maybe Danny. To be fair, Pep's bit handsome face has been on FPL Champ Man every week for the last month or so. So here we are. Basically, all three of us here are in a SKLW tournament team called Son of a Gun. We've been friends for quite a while. These are two of my favorite people in what you would call the FPL community or whatever you want to say. And we were going to have a chat anyway. We've all got beers out. I'll be honest with you, I'm finishing a jasmine tea at the same time as having a beer. So total whatever you want to call me, it's totally fine. But yeah, without further ado, we're just going to have an FPL chat over the international break, and I'm going to introduce you to a couple of friends. So, Danny, do you want to kick us off? Introduce yourself and however way you want to.
Yeah, cheers, Rich. Yeah, complete amateurs here, aren't we? And I'm absolutely,
Good on you.
I'm absolutely gagging for a beer as well. So I will
There we
open
go.
one in a second. I've postponed it, but I'm not on the jasmine tea like you. But yeah, I thought we just decided we often have these chats, don't we, on a Friday anyway for our whatever it's called, SK. I say whatever it's called. I know that it's like SKW, but I always call it SOAG because that's the name of our team. So
Yeah, son of a gun.
no one will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, we often have these chats anyway about FPL, didn't we? So you suggested maybe we should just record one for a laugh and just on the international break, given the dearth of FPL content out there. But yeah, I'm Danny, and I'm also known as AKA Bullet, that awful name on Twitter, or Move78, and so on.
Yeah, people will already be kind of disappointed to see that you're not Matt Damon. I'm not Rick Mail. You're definitely not Pep
Oh,
Guardiola.
Pep Guardiola, yeah.
Um, so just to introduce Pep, I'll let him do it for a second. But you were the first person I ever met in the FPL community, Pep.
All
Uh,
right.
Face to face, you helped me set up Son of a Gun, which is our SKLW team, which is the fantasy football community tournament. And we've been running that badly for a few years now.
Yeah, yeah. We been doing that tournament. This is the fourth season
Mm.
in that team. I'm quite actively involved in the admin behind the game now, running the game with a few of the other chaps in the background, getting all the stats and the Twitter account updated each week. And like you said, also I was dropped in on the podcast last night for the stream for the Champ Man. So yeah, trying to get my face out in the community a bit more rather than just hanging around on Twitter for 4 years.
Well, this is it, isn't it? They don't let us out on pods very often. They don't let us out the house very often, so we have to set up our own thing just so that we can chat about this for a little while. But and of course, you were world number one in Champman for a little while, weren't you? Are you almost back to former glory?
Yeah, fourth at the moment. Used to be world number one. Was the top
Really?
player
Danny didn't
last
know.
week. So yeah, that's really my bag at the moment. FPL not so good, but yeah, chat man doing well.
For the sake of anyone who doesn't know us that well, Pep is the one who makes exciting decisions. Danny's the one who makes logical decisions, and I make boring decisions. So hopefully that will come across or not through the course of this. But yeah,
Yeah, Pep's right striker extraordinaire, isn't he?
yeah. Well, don't reveal our secrets, Danny.
No.
Can't give that away. For anyone who doesn't know as well, we're a bit of a odd star-studded team. We've got Baker from above average, Lego Mane, Pras, and a whole bunch of other great players in that as well. So hopefully one day we'll succeed in that way. I don't want to do. We've talked already about not going on about our teams and banging on about things that no one else would care about, and whether we scored 60 points or 55 points last week. I mean, who cares? But Danny, just kick off with you. I mean, how's it gone so far? Does it feel like it's been decent? Has it met expectations? What's gone well or not so far?
Um, it's not gone well, but I mean, I'm okay. I I'm very calm about it. I didn't look. I think I'm like 1.3 million or something. But I mean, it's a bit strange for me because I do actually normally start well, and I know that's not easy to say. And it's like, well, you just get lucky normally, which is fine. Yeah, okay. But typically, I feel like it's usually one of my strengths game week one, and I don't know. I was a bit disillusioned with FPL after the last couple of years. It just didn't find it quite as enjoying, and I think that did affect me. Like going into game week one, I tried and I did think hard, but I just wasn't. I didn't feel as natural, and I ended up with a team that probably, in hindsight, didn't feel so natural. I mean, it's not been a great start, but I've been really calm. I'm actually really chilled about FPL at the moment. I'm sort of a bit more, I don't know, yeah, relaxed about it, and don't let it affect me too much. And actually, I'm very happy with my team, and as long as being relaxed at the moment is just, I think, fingers crossed, it'll probably only last a few weeks, but it's enabling me to make sort of logical decisions. And if I'm happy with my decision every week, then I'm completely fine with whatever rank I'm, because I think you do have to be, you do have to be a bit more kind of like that this season. It is going to be a punishing season, so you've got to be happy with your decision, and then whatever your
Yeah.
rank is, that's what it is.
I mean, one thing I've noticed about, so one of the odd things, other people who are involved in the SKLW tournament thing will know what I'm talking about here if you run the team or supposedly manage the team. But you end up knowing people's playing styles and their teams as well as them, or maybe sometimes weirdly better than they do. And Danny, I would say from the one thing that I've seen so far is that you're very happy when you've backed and you believe in the player, and you get kind of quite annoyed when you've not backed that player. So like the recent thing with Palmer, and we'll come on to talk about Palmer because obviously it's a really kind of hot topic for a lot of people over the international break. But because you backed him, that decision must have felt like it was worth double, really.
Yeah, it was nice. It was very nice. To be honest, it was weird. Like when Palmer, I was driving the car and I had it on the radio. I was on the way home, and when he scored his first goal after a few minutes, and then his second, I was thinking, God, you know what? I can't. I'd forgotten what it's like to actually have a player just scoring goals. Not many people, at least in the community, own. It genuinely was a weird feeling. And then, so it was nice. I mean, I'm not. The thing with me is I'm quite a lone wolf player, and I need to be. I tend to block everything out. I'll tweet, but I don't really look at stuff. I don't really scroll stuff. I do listen. Of course, I listen, but I listen with a heavy filter, and I don't really ask opinions unless I really feel like I need to. I just block everything out because it just so. Palmer, I suppose, was one of those. I've been quite happy about the season because I feel a little bit less bothered. I feel like I'm backing myself a little bit more and just a little bit calmer about decision. And Palmer was one that I just felt he never really left. Well, he never left a draft. I did contemplate keeping Salah for that Wolves game, but yeah, it was nice. I'm not bothered about the player. I'm not bothered about necessarily that I've backed someone or anything like that. What I like is if I feel like I've got the team that I'm happy with and the structure that I'm happy with, and like the players in place. And so that makes me much more comfortable in terms of making future decisions and thinking about FPL. And the way I had it in my head was I was going to have Haaland, Palmer, and Saka basically, and kind of Trent, and I was quite happy with the players around them.
Yeah.
So that made me feel just very happy with that structure and draft. I was very calm about it. So and so I still feel like that now. You know what I mean?
And there's a few names already there that people are thinking of losing. So it'd be quite interesting to see what you think about that, because a couple of the names you've sort of perma stays in your team might be. I've seen a lot of people, for example, talking about selling Trent this week or next week. So it'd be interesting to see what you say about that. Pep, just quickly on your team. So you also wildcarded last week, was it, or the week before last, rather, game week 6?
Yeah,
And
I wasn't intending to either.
no, yeah, that was because of the Raya situation, and you'd taken a hit or two, and you before that.
Yeah, so I felt like I kept taking hits, and everybody else kept talking about storing up transfers, and I kept taking hits to get out of problems. So I thought, if I've got these problems, why don't I just do a sweep through on some good fixture turns and get that sorted? And I was still umming and ahhing about it at the end of the week, and then the whole Raya situation. I thought I can't go into the game with no goalkeeper because my other goalkeeper was a non-playing goalkeeper and have taken a hit, and lots of people are going to be wildcarding. I just didn't feel I could do it.
Hmm.
But in hindsight, Raya played, and I took out some players which have worked out, and the ones that replaced them haven't. So I sort of regret doing that in some ways.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
gets
It
back
was
to
a Friday
what
night wildcard, wasn't it? The worst of all wildcards is the Friday night
yeah,
wildcard.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And it's kind of like what Danny said in that if you kind of make a decision and you kind of like it and you kind of like back it all the way, You feel much happier than when you decide to chop and change, and then you don't really commit to anything that you actually believe in.
Yeah.
And that's where I found myself.
No, yeah, fair enough. I think so. As explained earlier on, complete amateur hour here. We're not proclaiming to hit any huge number of views or subscribers or whatever. We just thought, well, why not record it and see what happens and see if it interests anyone. But what we're going to do, we just got to kind of see a few questions or kind of hot topics that we thought we'd just talk through. We're not going to. I've got no stats or graphics or anything other than the ones that we got in our heads. Least of all for Pep, because he is the most anti-review, anti-algorithm manager. Because you came from an era, didn't you, Pep, where it was sort of Telegraph and Sun football pages buying Mike Newell for 2 million or whatever it was, you know.
Yeah. You're cutting out coupons out of newspapers and send them off in the post, phoning premium rate lines to find out what rank you've got, rather than there was no internet or apps or available. There was no smartphones, whatever. It's
Better
yeah,
times.
time
Better
ago.
times. There you go. Nice. Well, I kind of wanted to kick off with just, I mean, this is the only kind of broad question, then we'll go into some of the kind of hot topics that I've got written out. I actually asked just a few friends earlier on kind of what kind of things that they would like covered. So I'm not going to pretend this is being put out to lots of different people or anything like this. But I'm quite interested to see, so far, I don't know, just in terms of what teams you've seen so far, anything has particularly caught your eye, and which kind of particular players or teams that your perceptions have changed on, somewhat. And I'll kind of kick this off a little bit. It's just a little bit before we start on any of the big questions. But I mean, when I asked myself this earlier, the first team that sprung to mind was Fulham, which is an odd one, but I have a huge amount of respect for the job that manager done. And full disclosure, unfortunately for me, I mean, we all support a team that's kind of underwhelming one way or another here, depending on how you look at it. But as a long-suffering West Ham fan, I kind of thought Marco Silva would have been maybe one of those people that would have been nice to kind of move a few mountains to get, and perhaps it will end up okay, but him and actually even some of the players that Fulham have and have managed to really succeed this season. Jimenez, actually, strange enough, was one of the names that sprung to mind. The way he's playing at the moment, the kind of confidence he has. Obviously, everyone probably saw that assist, and really kind of utilizing the strengths of players like Adama Traore, someone who kind of many of us have probably not mocked in the past, but one particular kind of skill set, almost a sort of money ball tactic of, well, this is what he's good at. We just need to get manipulate that strength and get something out of it. And players that I previously thought were not that good, I don't know, Calvin Bassey or someone like this, surprisingly, at least in the games that I'd seen, to be pretty good. And the other names that sprung to mind for me just on this was Forest. And we have a manager in our kind of team, don't we? And Pep, Fpl Richie, who tells us everything that he can, sorry, about that particular team. And I have a particular love now of Nikola Milenkovic, who'll come up later in this pod as well. So a strange man love for big Hulk-like centre backs. So that's kind of me so far. But yeah, those are some of the names that have jumped out. My expectations of them have changed somewhat. How about you? I was going to say Stu there. Well, Pep's the one on the screen. So how about yourself, Stu? Who have you enjoyed watching so far? Who has maybe not met expectations as well?
It's been a difficult start to the season, trying to work out what teams are and what they're about. Chelsea with the new manager coming in, I got to be honest. I had did a league prediction like before the season started of where I thought teams might finish, and I actually thought that Chelsea could be a complete car crash, and it actually looks like they could be quite good now. So it's really just figuring out which teams and which players are actually going to be reliable. And I don't think we've really got that full information yet, even 8 or 9 weeks into the season. So I'm
No,
still
yes,
trying to figure that out.
yeah, still a little bit of a waiting game on a few. As you say, with Chelsea, I mean, obviously Palmer's going to be someone we talk about in a minute, but they're a good example, aren't they? We had this conversation before about whether you could trust some of their other players, and it was quite tricky to really kind of buy into that. How about yourself, Danny? Any thoughts jump out?
Yeah, just thinking actually it caught me off guard a bit with that. So I'm trying to think of it through like an FPL lens because I completely agree with the teams that you've suggested. Like I tend to like, especially this early, is minimize like how much of an opinion I try to form about really most teams, unless it's like I think it's really significantly FPL relevant. Um, so for example, like the teams that you mentioned are teams I'm now thinking about because I think it's really like relevant and important, even if after a short space of time in terms of FPL decisions, because of these, like you said, Fulham have just consistently been a really good team now, and they're like even better now maybe than they were, and they've got a really good manager, and it's a bit like Brentford. I know Brentford are no different, but I think about Brentford as very FPL relevant because a bit like Fulham now, after having captained Haaland against them in the weekend, they're not really teams that I want to captain a player against, for
Yeah,
example. And
exactly.
same with Forest, you know what I mean? So potentially Forest, Fulham, and Brentford as three examples are really FPL relevant, and they're teams that I will allow into that sphere of like thought because I need to think twice with so many options these days. If you're thinking about captaincy, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that actually, because that is what makes them FPL relevant, and I do think it's one of those things that, I mean, you hear this this is not to criticize anyone else's pods because I'm aware of that this is just a little chat, um, but one of the advantages you can gain is by knowing those kind of middling teams and knowing where their strengths and weaknesses lie. And if I turn the clock back, etc., would you think in terms of maybe you wouldn't captain a player against a Fulham, for example, whereas or Nottingham Forest are the obvious one. What was it, game week 4 or 5 with Liverpool and Salah? A lot of people would have gone down that track. Now, would we think twice about that decision? I think a lot of people would. I mean, a little bit of this reminds me of my own team, West Ham. Is I would have thought to myself, by this stage of the season, I would have said, okay, this is a time where you'd start to avoid captaining us because I kind of had this understanding in my head that Lopetegui was going to be defensive first. He's got two midfield pivots, two big centre backs ultimately, Wan-Bissaka and so on and so forth. Now stop thinking about West Ham as a team to target for captains, but it hasn't quite worked out like that yet. So it is interesting. Some of these teams are just moving a little bit one way or another in your understanding of them. So yeah. Um, Good. Okay, I think if we get straight into kind of some of the questions that were kind of sent to us, or we've kind of put together. Now, one is a big one. So this is about kind of pricing. I know lots of people have had their say on it already about what we think of pricing this season versus previous seasons, and kind of linked to that is the big price that everyone needs to think about, which is Haaland and whether he's worth 15.4 million. I mean, Stu, what with when the pricing came out and how it's kind of manifested itself so far, are you pretty happy with that? Do you think it creates quite an interesting game? Is it obvious
Yeah, I do.
how to play the pricing so far?
I think the pricing. I think that the FPL got the pricing pretty much spot on. They needed to make some more premiums. They needed to make Haaland more expensive. They needed to make it so that we couldn't have all the players that we wanted. And luckily, none of the cheaper players like Palmer did last year didn't move to other teams. So it's always a danger bringing the game out so early that those cheaper assets suddenly become amazing and everyone has them like it did last year. And then you can buy all of the expensive ones. But now, yeah, I'm quite enjoying the fact that no one can have all of the players they want and a little bit of thought about how you're going to maneuver them around, maybe play the fixtures, form, etc. Yeah, I think it's a really good game this year.
I mean, actually, one
Much.
of the things that struck me, so there's another question later on which we'll get to about where you use your transfers and how to deploy them, whether you should just focus them on the premium assets or whether, and I think actually before we came on earlier on, Danny was talking about Dwight McNeil. Now Danny has a particular relationship with Dwight McNeil, as does one of our friends, FPL Fraser, as well. And it's also, there's that interrelationship, isn't it? That okay, we can talk about Haaland being whether he's worth 15.4, etc., but being able to spot when Dwight McNeil clearly isn't a 5.4, he's something else, or he's so important and so on. Is another kind of side to that coin. Sorry, Danny, I'll hand over to you. What do you think about the pricing?
No, I'm just thinking now, and I do think that like official FPL are probably given a little bit too much credit, for this whole pricing thing, because I don't think the success or the seeming success so far of the pricing system is less a result of FPL's approach to pricing as it is about just the players that are available, and who the players are. So like the best thing they did was make Haaland 15 million. So that was the big change. It did make Haaland 15 million, which I think was great, and it does make it particularly interesting. But last season was obviously an anomaly. It wasn't also a massive anomaly. I know it happens a lot, but you had the best player in FPL was 5 million.
Yeah.
The second best player in FPL was what was like 8 million striker or whatever he was. Watkins, or arguing between those two. Saka was whatever he was, probably underpriced. And obviously Haaland wasn't 15 million, so it was crazy. You could just have everyone. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say Palmer was the best player. So obviously those players now have just been priced appropriately based on the season they had. And obviously not just that, but Palmer and Saka in particular were already incredible last season. But I think they've both gone up a level again as well. And Arsenal have gone up a slight level again. Saka's gone up a little bit of a level. Palmer's probably gone up a little bit of level because it's only natural. And Chelsea's attack is probably better than it was last year, definitely in terms of personnel. So, that obviously has a massive impact on the value of Haaland. If you're talking about whether Haaland's worth 50 million, I don't think there is an answer to that question, because it's team dependent. It could go one way or the other. There's not an objective answer. But with there being so many other alternatives now, or options, so many options that are genuinely like they're repeatable options. Saka and Palmer are incredibly reliable, repeatable options that you'd happily captain, and obviously Salah as well. You could argue Salah's might have dipped slightly. He probably has. Obviously, when you've got a whole range of options, it makes it much easier to avoid Haaland, because you can pick one of a selection of players based on fixtures more easily. It's not just, okay, has Salah got a good fixture instead, or is someone else? So those other players have a massive impact on the answer to whether Haaland's worth it or not. And it's an interesting one, because I remember, it was obviously like, what was it, a year or two ago, when that discussion came up, and even like Trout did that analysis, didn't he, where he sort of looked at it statistically and said that the line between kind of optimal and suboptimal was about 15 million. That's where it became a question. I wonder how that's changed now, because it's a difficult one. You'd probably say that maybe it is suboptimal because there are so many other options. But having said that, it's complicated, because like you said, it's about the other players that are really cheap still, what you can fit in. Because I still think Palmer is probably the best player in the game. I've said that for a while. I think he probably is. It's close, but Haaland is still someone who you're very, very, very comfortable with in terms of. I would feel more comfortable with Haaland and Salah, for example, in terms of reliability, in terms of chances of scoring goals. So anyway, it's a long-winded answer, but what I'm saying is, it's definitely a massive debate. You can relatively easily fit 2 to 3 good premiums in your team. So if it is a structure like mine that's got Haaland and a Palmer and a Saka, because I think right now you start with a Palmer and Saka, and it's the other questions are then around whether it's Salah or Haaland, because that's how good Palmer and Saka are. And it's a question of who you then relying on the cheaper options, which is not going as well for me at the moment.
No, I think this is like a horribly diplomatic thing to say, but the answer, unfortunately, is yes and no, which is that you're okay. So the earlier point about McNeil, for example, or if you were I don't know, you had the incredible foresight to realize how good Fulham midfielders were, for example, Adama Traore or Smith Rowe, or whatever it might be, or if you were someone who went early on Rodgers and so on. Is if you have the confidence to know that those are, put it this way, when I was putting together, when I was putting together wildcard drafts, I do remember thinking, I got lucky enough in terms of Smith Rowe right from the beginning. Price rises happen quite early on, and thinking to myself, I have no real belief that any of these kind of 7.5, 8 million players were necessarily going to be any more consistent performers than Smith Rowe or McNeil or whatever it might be. Why not just have three of those positions allocated to those kind of spots? Then you can have your Watkins and that sort of thing. And ultimately, it's going to depend on how well you feel, how confident you feel at balancing those things out. At that time, the 5.5 kind of million midfielders seemed just as good an option as say an Eze. Whereas that might not be the case around. I think it's a lot of people were looking at something like game week 12, 13. There's a little bit of a swing. And perhaps it's another time where you think, well, I don't really want to lose and Boomo yet, but I do want Bowen. For example, we'll talk about him later because he's my boy, so to speak. And that's where you have to make that kind of judgment call. So it's tricky. Are you considering at some point going Haaland-less, Stu?
Yeah, I was going to have a look at it. I was going to see how many of the other premiums I can fit in. If I went Haaland-less, could I get three of the other premiums? I was thinking, because if it's only two, then and the extra cash doesn't really get you up from one of those cheap players that you were just talking about,
Yeah,
up to a premium player, then that might be the point where I think it's not worth it, because those cheap players have performed so well, and I think they're the key. I think, like you said, the mid price players haven't really shone so far, and therefore it's about the premium players, and then
yeah.
fitting the cheap players around them, and how many of them you can get in.
This conversation would look very different, wouldn't it, if Bruno Fernandes had not done Bruno Fernandes things?
Yeah,
And it certainly would look like a very different combination. Sorry, a conversation if Foden wasn't the way that he is or has been this season, so to speak, which is
Yeah,
something that will come up again as well. Sorry, Danny.
yeah, no, sorry. I think though that they are the players that these mid-price players are the players that are key and that are going to make it interesting. Certainly for me. So obviously, again, it's just team dependent. Depends on where you sit and what your approach is. But for me, if I start from a base, as I said before, in my head of like Palmer and Saka, that probably is that basically is my long. That would be the long term base. I'm not saying that's necessarily needed right now, especially with fixtures, and obviously that's another conversation when we talk about Foden. But the players that make things interesting potentially or worrying are players like Hazard, not Hazard, what I'm talking about, but the Havertz and Solanke and potentially Trent, and these players that are 8 million. Because I am again, that becomes the question. If you've got Saka and Palmer, it's not going to get into specific teams, but if you've got Saka and Palmer, and then you've got Haaland, whether you have Haaland or Salah or one or neither, all of that dictates whether you can afford these 8 million players like Havertz and Solanke, who I think could be really good, both of them,
Mm.
and Trent and so on. So it is still that those mid-price players seem to be like the key
Yeah.
versus these super players who are, at the moment, Vardy's not doing anything. Calvert-Lewin is getting chances, but he's not doing any points.
Well, I mean, we know that Vardy just needs to get back in the oxygen tent and do his yoga, and things will
This
come
is his
back.
week. This
You're
is his
not
week.
planning to get rid of him though, surely, Danny. You've committed to him now. He's your man.
Well, we'll come to that because I might go supreme suboptimal Sally next week, but I'll definitely have him this week against Southampton. So he really does need to turn up.
Yeah, Southampton away, is it?
Yeah, which
Yeah,
that looks like a Vardy fixture, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, the centre backs don't inspire a great deal of confidence there, do they? Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, Stu, one of the questions you asked is kind of, I mean, seeing as we're talking about pricing and Haaland, you did ask, you put a little question when we were putting some ideas together as to what to talk about whether he can remain or whether should remain perma captain kind of going forward, and whether non-owners got sort of lucky, well, not lucky, depending on how you look at it in the last few weeks. I mean, what's your thought there? I mean, does he someone who's going to remain in there for the next 5 or 6 fixtures just to captain or not?
well, at the moment, City just in going into a good run of fixtures, so he's definitely staying,
Mm.
and he probably will be the captain most weeks for the 5 fixtures they've got coming up. But yeah, I mean, I'm never frightened to captain someone else is one thing. as I demonstrated with my Semenyo captain the other week. But yeah, you've got to. I think owning him, if you're not captaining him in the good fixtures, might be enough. But then if you're not captaining him, you're not committing to it. So I think you've either got to not have him, or you've got to captain him. You've either got to commit to the full hog of not having those Haaland points, or the people that have got him have got to try and take as many as they can. I think owning him and not captaining him through good fixtures is sort of a midpoint that doesn't achieve either of those objectives.
A very Danny specific question here, but you can give your thoughts on the Haaland captain in a moment. But I'm also quite curious to see what you think of other cities. I've seen quite a few people thinking of, especially with there's a little bit of Saka knock. I know there's a debate about whether that goes to anything, but whether Foden or another City asset interests you in any way. I know that a few people I'd asked earlier wanted me to suggest Edison to you as an asset because of your relationship with him. But any thoughts on City more generally, their assets and Haaland as well, if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably actually the exact person in the world that you should never ask about City players, really, outside of like the obvious ones in terms of Haaland and stuff. Like Foden. Historically, has just always been a complete nightmare for me because he's just very hard to predict, and I typically don't like players that are significant minutes risk players. There's a number of times of even last season I actually managed to own him for a couple of his hat tricks or one of his hat tricks last year, and then I still sold him at the end, and he got started carried on getting hat tricks. You can never get it right. And then the seasons that I've bought him through fear, and he's done nothing as you would as I would have expected. But I don't mind. This is the really interesting thing. Foden is absolutely fine if people want to go there based on the fixtures. It's an annoyingly good time potentially because obviously Saka's got a good fixture and then they get a little bit harder. Palmer's got fixtures aren't great, and Foden's are really good. At the moment, I don't like Foden objectively because his minutes are so insecure, and the comments from Pep are a bit dodgy. Pep had that interview and he said something like, he was asked about Foden. He said something like, "Oh, no, he's fine. He's like when he's clever up here, he'll be fine." And that was like, okay, so is he on the naughty step? It's been a bit weird so far. We don't really know what's going on with Foden, so I don't like it because obviously, like I said before, again, I'm someone who's got Saka and Palmer, so it's different. But Saka is better than Foden, and Palmer is better than Foden, regardless. And it's kind of frustrating because there's definitely an opportunity there, and I do think we've ended up just talking about Foden, but I will for a second. But I think that people do consistently, most people do consistently like misjudge, when they're trying to judge in a player, the idea of like a player with whole potential who's a minutes risk versus a player with maybe slightly worse fixtures who's definitely going to play. Like it's so significant. Like people base the judgment on what they want will happen, what they think might happen, what a story they've created in their minds about how it could go down, how punishing it could be. But the fact is that Foden's minutes are really uncertain, and so player A, who's a good player who's definitely going to play, that should be really significant versus player B, who 60% of the time it works every time, kind of thing. It's just, do you know what I mean? So it kind of frustrates me because I see some people going, Foden looks great. I'm definitely getting Foden, and it's like, okay, it could work, but Foden is right now is still an objectively bad pick in my mind. So it's gonna backfire. It punishes me every time. So it's really frustrating because I'm in a position where I'm happy with my players. There's not even an option for me to get Foden because there's no way I'd be taking out Saka or Palmer. But it's a coin flip and it could work. It could be hat tricks all around. Knowing the fact that I won't have him, it probably will be.
I'm impressed that you managed to get a Sex Panther reference in there, Danny. I'm not quite sure how you managed it.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's like,
There we go. Hopefully there's not a great deal of continuity errors
those
in our spliced Zoom call here. We're not professional. We didn't know that. We didn't remember that it was 40 minutes and all that jazz, and all the pros watching, of which there's probably like one. we'll know that how stupid we are. But we talked about Sex Panther, and if anyone understands that reference, good. But if not, we're back to talking about City assets. Pep, let's talk about something you do know. Do you think Foden is worth going in for, or is there someone else that you're eyeing up for the next few fixtures for City?
I don't think I'll be going for Foden. Obviously, he hasn't started this season with many minutes. We don't quite know how he fits into how Pep wants to play at the moment. If he's put out wide, I don't like him at all. If he plays number 10 behind Haaland, then I've had him last season when he was doing that, and he was quite successful with that setup. But until I see that, I'm not going anywhere near Foden.
No. I mean, just to add to that a little bit, because I know that Danny's obviously said his piece already, which is that, okay, there are some people who, if they feel confident about the high ceiling and they understand that the minutes risk is there, they might be willing to do that. It's not especially kind of Danny's game. It's not particularly mine either, but it's for a slightly different reason. I think there are some managers I know wildcarded at the same time. They had racked up 2 or 3 transfers. And in that situation, I think you're in a much more Foden friendly space. Personally, up to my wild card anyway, there was an injury every week. Something I think it was Solanke week 1. Obviously, then you had the Nkunku drop and all this kind of stuff. So at no point whatsoever have I been able to kind of hold. I mean, last week was the first week where I could hold off and bank transfers. And I think in the scenario I'm in, Foden doesn't really represent a good idea because I was one of the. I'm trying to. Am I allowed to swear here? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, I was one of the misfortunate fools that went down the kind of Diaz route, and now I need to think about how I feel about that. Don't say anything. And for people like us who are uncomfortable with that kind of situation, I don't think Foden is my guy. To be honest with you, there's going to be a lot of people, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but if Saka's little hop or twisted ankle or whatever it might be does lead to anything, it gives everyone an annoyingly easy route to do something that Danny probably doesn't want them to do, which is obviously to go to Palmer. I wanted to talk about him now, actually, Danny. My question that I've written down here is how smug is Danny, and for the rest of us, when and how do we get Palmer? Now, I was someone who got on him at 4.9 million last season, earlier than most. That is mainly because I listened to one person, and he's in the room. So, Danny, let's talk to you about Palmer because you knew that he was something special before I did, if I'm honest. I was happy that West Ham tried to sign him last summer and didn't work out, but didn't. Yeah, talk to us. I mean, yeah, how good do you feel about that? And for the rest of us, should we be moving mountains now, or should we be waiting until I think it's game week 12, isn't it, where he's got a fixture away to Leicester and it starts a lovely run?
Is it? Yeah, I'll just get that up now. No, yeah, no, thanks for that. That's kind words about last season. But no, I don't feel smug. Obviously, obviously, good side of variance. Palmer just getting four first half goals is ridiculous. You can't feel smug about getting that kind of fortunate with it. But yeah, I just feel like I was just always very comfortable on Palmer. I was again. I sort of talked before about like blocking stuff out and being a lone wolf, and I was very quite robust like that sometimes. So the week before I did have I guess a different view to a lot of people, but I said it on above average. A lot of people would, in my opinion, kind of create narratives, because it was hard for them to get, and they'd rather have a piece of this and a piece of that and spread the cash around. And it's like, oh no, he's not looking quite as involved and all this sort of stuff. And I just think 6 games in, and he's not perfectly involved to me. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because like with the Diaz thing, again, I don't want to sound this genuine because it's one of these. A lot of people would want it to be brought up and talk about it, and it's not me being smug because I considered having Diaz primarily because I was thinking about having Salah as a captain that week, and I would have easily been able to get to those two. But the Diaz thing is fascinating because it does show it's not necessarily what everyone's thinking, because he is a good pick probably, and he looked fantastic, no doubt about it. But what does it say about how short-term thinking a lot of people are? Because it's quite funny, isn't it, that after one game, he actually started the game, he blanked, he started the next game, and then everyone wanted to sell him because they're worried about his minutes. And I think it's just, what does that say about what people were thinking before getting him on wildcard? There's such that pull towards that fear and thinking he's going to haul against Wolves. Anyway, we might not want to go down that, but it was fascinating to me to watch the turnaround on Diaz after one game. So you can tell us Rich about that, but yeah, I mean Palmer, like I said, is best player in the game. So for me, it was get those pieces in position. I mean, again, just be serious for a second. People talked about things like flexibility. Baker, we talked with Baker about what he views as flexible, or how he likes to structure his squad and spread it around a little bit. Whereas I very much think about structure and flexibility a lot. It's just that I just think about it a little bit differently. So when I've got players like Trent in place, which sometimes can work against me and hold, massively. So I worry about selling Trent, for example, in the next few weeks, because then I don't have that structure. It's very difficult to get him back if you do spread the cash around and so on. But for me, having those sort of pieces in place, if you like, on the board, having that Trent piece and that Palmer piece, Palmer and Saka were kind of non-negotiable. So can I get those pieces in place without sacrificing too much? And I just felt that I wasn't sacrificing all that much. You know what I mean? And then it would have been very difficult, as it is at the moment, as you say, for people to get him in. So, yeah, stop me.
I think the reality is, I mean, if we're moving on a little bit to the DS conversation, because I think he's a popular consideration. I think a lot, well, in our squad anyway, with the SKLW, going back to that again, I think a lot of people probably on the Saturday morning, maybe 3 or 4, suddenly sold Diaz. I think Johnson was probably the most popular one to go to, and we can talk about him in a bit as well. But on people's wildcards, it was a kind of convergence, wasn't it? No one, I don't think a great deal of us, at least to the people I talked to, had a huge amount of faith in the DS pick, actually. It was more that there was a convergence of a few things. One, people started to get the fear because of Wolves. That fixture at the time looked quite saucy, let's be honest. He was the right price. I think if Bowen had started that kind of run, I mean, personally, I wouldn't have thought a great deal about it. I would have got straight on him. I know it's not even necessarily a hugely FPL decision. It's just a love for the player, a belief in the player, that kind of thing. If I'd had the same feeling about someone else, it could have been them. So I think it was a convenient way out to make 14 spots in your squad look nice and tidy. And DS was a little bit of a comfort blanket. And I think if most people will admit that probably now. Is it really what they wanted to do? Apologies if my internet's a bit wobbly, by the way. Stu, do you think Palmer now?
I was going to ask Danny actually. I haven't got Palmer. Obviously, I like Palmer. I had him last season. I think he's amazing. It's just, at what point do I get on? At some point, I will. I'm already wildcarded. The structure I've got at the moment, I don't have a player of that kind of value in that slot. My cheapest midfielders are Diaz and Bumo. So, and it's difficult to want to get rid of Bumo. And Diaz, like you said, I haven't really given a chance yet. He hasn't really, and that Liverpool attack is still good. I know they've got slightly more difficult fixtures, but they are good. And it just seemed like a financial decision on that Diaz that I could get a left-sided Salah as he was playing similar for £5 million less. So I don't really have the structure to get Palmer in. And I need to build up some transfers, I feel like, in the next few weeks in order to get him in a bit later. Would you advise people to get him in now, or do you feel that anyone who's played that wild card, missed that opportunity, now needs to wait until the better fixtures roll around?
I think for most people, yeah, they probably do. I mean, it's not a flat answer because again, it's team dependent. Like you know, it's suboptimal if you like to get him in now. That's the bottom line. But it does depend on like your transfer situation, how many transfers you've got, what you're going to do with the other transfers, because um yeah, he's like long term you want Palmer in your team.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the bottom line. So you can get that piece in place now. And then the question is, what can you do with your other transfers? If for you, it seems like if it's not easy for you to get Palmer, the
Yeah,
obvious move is to go for a more, this is an opportunity for a lot of people. That's what the season is short. There aren't that many games in the season. The game is really tough. The swings are so big right now. And when you think about the swings and the amount of options that there are for people without Palmer, it's like I think you pretty much, if it's not easy to get to in one move, you pretty much swallow it. Looking at the next four, Liverpool away, Newcastle away, I still think he'll return.
yeah.
I think he'll return reasonably well. But there are other players that could return just as well, for cheaper. So there's a kind of an opportunity there, and I think you just have to look at it and go, I've missed those. I've missed the 25 point. I've missed the 6 point. Yes, long term. This is the really difficult thing, like emotionally, isn't it? Because you know that season long you want him, and so your brain wants to sort of resolve that conflict. It wants to resolve that decision and not have to think about it anymore, because it's really frustrating having to go through a 4 week period knowing there's a player that you want for the rest of the season and knowing how good he is. And so it takes a lot. It takes a lot, kind of, cognitively to not do that. You do have to look at the four fixtures probably and just say there are lots of other options, whether it's Johnson or even Foden. Because there's an opportunity there to roll the dice. I'm not suggesting necessarily get Foden, but the fixtures are great, and if he does start a few, he probably will match Palmer, say, over the next four.
But when people are buying Palmer and his price is going up,
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I know.
and you know that you want him at some point in the future, and you get a bit sweaty, don't you? Waiting on it, waiting for the right time to jump in.
Yeah, I would, if whatever you're doing, especially if you've used your wild card, I can't remember now, Pep, but whatever moves you're making, I would certainly be making those moves with Palmer in mind in 4 weeks.
Absolutely.
So you know that you've got a plan and you know that you can get him in. I wouldn't worry too much about price changes, because I mean, if he scores again against Liverpool or scores a couple, it's difficult because but you're talking, I don't know, he might go up 0.3,
Yeah.
but that's if he does really well. Chances are he might go up another 0.1 maybe, and then chances are he does just get kind of medium returns or blanks a couple and he won't go up again.
I mean, like Richie said, I mean, Saka is the perfect opportunity for people now, if he has got picked up an injury, to just fix that problem and get on now.
I know, and that'll be frustrating for someone like me, obviously really frustrating, because my structure is built around the fact that I've got those three premiums in place in Haaland and Saka and Palmer, and that will be frustrating. Obviously, the flip side is that it's just a Saka injury. In other words, he's never actually injured. He's just, he's taken a bit of a big knock. And the flip side is everyone sells Saka because he's orange flagged or yellow flagged, and we don't get any word from Arteta, and it's just Saka, and he just carries on playing. So then everyone sold Saka before he plays Bournemouth, which I'll be very happy about. I think you've got to be careful with moves like that again, because you've got to think about your long term structure. But I just think people have got to be calm and rational now. It's Liverpool away next. It's going to be a tough game. If Chelsea return, he's the most likely player to be involved, because he's just the best player in the game. But I just think you just don't worry about it. There's so many good options, and you can do a lot with the cash. I just think you've got to be calm. Again, probably I guess we'll have a quick look at teams, maybe see what it's looking like in terms of potential moves. But I just wouldn't worry too much about Palmer. At the same time, he's someone you absolutely do want long term.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's going to be a little bit of a down to fate situation for some. I mean, okay, so to someone like a Pep, I'm guessing you got 2 free transfers, and if you've got Saka and Diaz in those spots, it's quite easy to turn them into Palmer +1, isn't it? And that's what people
I've
will
got
do.
no Saka.
Oh, of course, yeah. See, this is the other element to it as well, and Danny's gonna throw me a nasty glare in a minute, but okay, so we'll talk about this in a minute. People were strongly considering a Trent sale to enable. They usually have to buy someone like a 4.3, 4.5 defender, and then they can bump up a Diaz type spot to a Palmer whenever it kind of suits them. And there's a few kind of moving parts to this. There's number one, I think people have forgotten a little bit that Liverpool's 10 to 12, I think it is a really quite decent attacking fixtures, maybe not beautiful defensive ones. So, you could even make an argument that for a few weeks you could, if you have the money, you can hop on Salah, for example. But the Trent decision is wrapped up in that a little bit as well. And then there's a question mark as to someone like a Danny and I think are both Raya people. We were hovering around the buttons at sort of 10:40, looking at him limp or not limp outside of a hotel block with his Arsenal teammates. We got in on that. Probably can't really move from that if I don't really want to move from that. I quite like the fact that that decision is made for sort of 15, 20 game weeks. And to me, okay, so everyone has blind spots in FPL. For me, one of them is Havertz. I don't, he's not a player I really get on with. I don't like, I've never really previously liked the look of him as a FPL asset. But I'm starting to, he's a good example of one of those ones where you think, am I deliberately using some sort of deep-seated bias here? And he's someone who, well, if you accept in FPL this season because of the good pricing, you can't own everyone. Well, is a Saka Havertz downgrade, so to speak, worthwhile for the benefit of your overall points tally? Maybe it is. I think in my situation, I would personally rather do that than sell Trent, but that's just I don't like that structural shift at all personally, just because I can't ever see me using the transfer necessary to put him back. But that's just a personal thought. So I suppose my question is if you have to sacrifice someone, Saka, Trent, whoever, would you do it? Who would it be? Would it be now? Would it be in a few weeks' time? So, Danny, you don't have to sacrifice anyone. I'm guessing to do an awful lot at this point in time. That was part of the plan, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so it's quite hard for me to kind of empathise with this one because that's what I'm seeing everyone else. How do I get Palmer in? Who do I sacrifice? And I keep thinking, well, I want to see the rest of your team because, like, I find it a little bit frustrating because I'm thinking, why was it? Oh, that's the sort of Palmer, not smugness, but the question you sort of asked before. I'm like, well, I've got Palmer Saka, but I've got 8 attackers. I don't really think that I didn't have to sacrifice. I didn't ever felt like I had to sacrifice much. If anything, my suboptimal moves in the next few weeks might, if I decide to keep Palmer, be to just kind of trim my bench even more. Just to get certain players in. But no, it's a really good point about Havertz because he is someone that I need to start thinking about, and I've not particularly liked him as an FPL option in the past, but at the moment he looks great and he looks nailed. He is a bit of a confidence player.
Well, yeah.
It's just 90 minutes, and he is basically up front, and he's looked good for a while. I've always thought Saka was better, so it's not like I was like thinking Havertz was terrible. I just preferred to have Saka, but I don't think it's. But I think people. I feel like it's almost a little bit fortunate that people have gone Diaz and Havertz because Havertz is very good and allows a lot. You'd be pretty happy with that. You could deal with that. I could deal with Havertz instead of Saka right now, especially for the next few. And like you, I wouldn't really want to be selling Trent just because like the alternatives, nothing jumps out. Nothing jumps out at all. City don't look quite the same. Otherwise, I was very keen on Vardiol a couple of weeks ago, and I still think he's a very good option. But there's something wrong at City a little bit, which is a separate discussion point, by the way. And I'm going off on tangents here, but I think KDB coming back is very important to everything. And I've not said that for a while, but Rodri's out for the season, and they need something there. But I'm just not really seeing. So I'm not. Again, it's just like the Foden thing, where it's like this is an opportunity for people actually who don't have Trent, and if you do sell Trent, fine, it could easily pay off because the fixtures are not great coming up, and it could easily end up just blanking, in a lot of the next few. So it could end up being I'm very frustrated, and I feel like I've got the players in that I want and the structure that I want, and actually that's prohibiting me from moving to the players who've got better fixtures. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it's not logical for me to move any of those guys in my position. So it's a bit of I hope that the players who I think are the better players with slightly harder fixtures pull through. But yeah, I mean, Trent is quite considerably better than most defenders, apart from basically Gabriel, I think. I know Porro's good, but I don't really trust Spurs. Fraser asked, didn't he, is about, and I know I've gone off on several tangents, but Fraser, a lot of people are thinking about who is the best cheap defender, because a lot of people are looking at Trent to get that 3 million. So it's like the kind of 4.5 or whatever. Again, I don't see many. Eight Nori, they've got Wolves have got amazing fixtures. He is really involved in attacking stuff, so I don't mind that, to be honest. Who else did I have in mind? You probably remind me of a few.
Well,
But
if I was, I know,
yeah,
yeah, as you say, Fraser asked about defenders under 5 million that we like. I mean, he's obviously the fixtures player. I don't think there's any kind of discussion about that.
Forest guys, to be honest.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this is, I mean, of no use to me whatsoever because I haven't actually got any points out of him when I've used him because I haven't probably. But I don't know. I don't really, unless you really needed the money to go down, I don't really see why you wouldn't have bought. This will sound smug now, actually. Milenkovic in game week 6 just seems like such an obvious stalwart there, someone who was in a top sort of 6 defense, someone who was going to play every week, someone who's got a great reputation, who everyone thought was going to go to a better. Oh God, I can't say this with Frenchie watching probably. Another kind of level of team. It seemed like an obvious one to me. Whether it would be easy to bring him in as opposed to someone like a Aiden Ori who's got the fixtures is another matter, isn't it? But I think personally it's one of those two, or you really park it and you think I can get through until say game week 10, 12 or something like this and just get someone long term in that you actually like. I don't know who that would be at this point in my head, but there are people who have got fixture turns that go on later on. I know some people talk about Brighton. I don't know about that necessarily, but there are options, or even just going back to Fulham because like I said, I do have a bit of a belief in them. So yeah, I think those are probably the ones. I
this
don't
is the
know.
thing. Like, this is the thing. I don't. Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt,
Hmm.
Rich, but just while we're on that, this is the thing. It still comes back to the same question that Pep had about Parma. Everyone's talking about asking about whether we should sell Trent. Aren't virtually all those people asking that question because they want Parma? I think so. And I think people just need to reset a little bit. Like I say, we're talking about selling probably the best defender in the game to get Palmer with whatever he's got. He's got Newcastle United, Arsenal. They're tough fixtures. It doesn't feel great. It feels like you're moving a little bit to last week's points, even though they're great players. I think there's surely something else in there to just. There are so many good options that are cheaper, and you
I think
don't need to sell Trent necessarily.
one more thing just to add to this very quickly. I mean, like I said, we're not pros here. I haven't got stats in front of me. I mean, from what I remember, Trent is at least double more the sort of expected goal involvements and all that kind of stuff to anyone else. But I think people are still a little bit of last year's Liverpool defense perception in their head here. They think, oh, difficult fixtures coming up. There's no way that Trent will be able to maintain a decent stance, etc. But their defense are not playing in the same way that we saw previously. I mean, some people have already said this about the goalkeeper. Oh, is it going to be a problem? Allison not around for a little while, etc. But well, hang on, they play differently. They don't have these one-on-ones anymore. They don't have someone marauding through and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I'm okay. So we talk about people with review, etc., and they force people out of solves. I got a little bit of that for Trent in my head. I don't really like the idea of meddling with that unless I absolutely need to. So I don't know. It's probably a no from me. Let's put it that way. How about you, Stu? If you had to make this kind of downgrade, I suppose this is my easy way of saying if I have to go down that route, I would rather sell another asset, and even if it was a Saka.
Well, I'm thinking about it quite strongly actually, and
Go
it's not to do with thinking about how Liverpool leaked goals last year, and because they are tighter this year, but it's more about the attacking returns. And at the moment, Trent's not getting the attacking returns. So, I mean, at the start of the season, I was on Canate, and I probably would have had more points from him had I not moved to Trent in some ways, because the clean sheets are coming, but the attacking returns aren't. And I can use some of that extra money, but then I look at who am I going to downgrade to, and I don't I don't like the Aid Nori pick. I don't like a lot of the cheap defenders. I don't, apart from Rico Lewis, I can't see anyone below 5 million that I'd regularly want to put in the team. So if I lose Trent to get some money to upgrade somewhere else, who am I going down to? And if I'm only going down to 6 million, 5.5 million, I know you mentioned Pedro Porro, but again, I'm with you. I don't trust the Spurs defence to get any clean sheets whatsoever. So am I better just holding on to an asset that I know is playing for a decent team that now seems a lot more solid at the back and has a high potential and a history of getting attacking returns, even if it's not at the moment? So yeah, I am weighing that one up, but I can't see anything there to go into the cheap market in order to get the most money out of doing the downgrade.
Yeah, I think, again, just thinking about as you're talking, Pep, and you made a good point there, Rich, about people thinking about last season. It is difficult. It's difficult to think about Trent in the next few games and what it looks like. It's very, very difficult. And I'm talking to myself now. I wouldn't want to sell him because I like these. If I see a player as a long-term keeper and I want him for the season, I just don't want to spend transfers there. But maybe sometimes there's a kind of thing of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like even if we don't know what's coming from Trent, what we are seeing and what we have seen is Liverpool just getting a lot of clean sheets, and they look very calm and assured and defensive and kind of structured. And so whilst it's even as an Trent owner, and I don't feel like wildly confident about him for the next 5 weeks, so maybe I'm thinking pessimistically, and I'm worried that people are going to sell him and they're going to get away with it because he's got tough fixtures. Actually, do you see what I'm saying? Like he is doing the points, and he should have had a lot more attacking turns than he's got. The numbers have been good, but just in terms of clean sheets, like they're just getting a lot of clean sheets. So maybe we just need to have a bit of faith in that and just go, okay, well, why would I take someone out who's doing the points?
Yeah, and the attacking returns might come. And then if you've already sold him, how do you get back? How do you get back there? You're making more changes to the structure and the team.
It's difficult, yeah. Difficult to get back. What are you thinking, Rich, with your team? Because obviously you're a Trent and Diaz owner, and don't own Palmer and stuff like that. So I guess you've got a bit more of a sort of template team at the moment.
Don't say that. Yeah, no, so I've got I don't know whether you can see on screen, I have to share the Lego Money
Well,
fixtures.
this is very professional of us.
Kind of. By the way, we've got another Zoom warning, so we have a 10-minute thing. So I'm not sure what we're going to do here, but I'll talk quickly. But yeah, just very quickly on that. I mean that gives you a bit of an indication as to as to what people's transfer targets and how they might kind of play fixtures going forward. I was just going to say very quickly, Stu, that one of the things that is a bit different about your situation as opposed to perhaps someone like me, I'm not going to characterize us because we actually often agree on a lot. But yeah, it gives me back to the Raya decision on that morning of the game week 6 wildcard. I in no way wanted to make these kind of stock transfers that I was never going to get round to. And that's why I wanted Raya in there, and I was willing to take the sort of, let's say, 40% risk that he wasn't going to start because I wanted him in there for the long term. At that time, perhaps wrongly, you could argue, I wanted Solanke in there instead of Havertz and so on and so forth. But I didn't want to make those moves, didn't want to bank those kind of problems down the line, didn't want to have to turn Raya around in game week, whenever it was that I wanted to get him back. And it's the same, same feeling with Trent. I just don't want to get lured into this situation where I have to worry about it, somewhere down the line to get him back, because I think often you won't turn it, you won't make room for it. Someone like you'd be willing to take a hit to get someone in if you really like them, whereas I'm not, probably. So I think this is kind of where I stand on it. I don't really want to touch that, so I won't touch it unless I absolutely have to. And I don't think Palmer is worth it right now to make that kind of mountain move. But I would happily do it if there's something wrong with Saka. So, swings and roundabouts, really. I wanted to talk just a little bit about transfer targets generally. We had a question from Mikey about where do we focus transfers. You know, he gave the example of Eze as someone where you should be patient or not. Someone like a Diaz obviously is a slightly different situation. And then we got people eyeing up assets in that kind of mid range, like Johnson and Spurs mids and that sort of thing. So, Danny, do you have any thoughts about where you use your transfers and over the next kind of period of time where you see good moves being made and maybe even where you think a target is being sort of overbaked a bit? I don't know how you feel about Spurs mids, for example.
Yeah, I'm gonna I'll try and be quick, but I've got a bit of a blind spot still with Spurs mids, and I acknowledge that I might be missing something with Johnson because he just does look, the minutes look good. He looks very involved. He's a kind of goal scorer. He's just not really my kind of player yet. But again, I don't necessarily have space for him. I don't see him as very talismanic. I'm still slightly worried about his minutes. I don't know who's going to come back. I don't know if his confidence is going to dip. So he's a risk, but it's fine. He certainly looks good at the moment. I quite like someone like Bowen, just because he's a bit more of a kind of kind of long-term data there, and he's just a bit talismanic, and he's very reliable in terms of minutes and so on. And West Ham, obviously a good performance. In terms of like where to spend transfers, it just depends on your team and what you have faith in. Like I'm sitting here again, I've got Saka and Palmer, so they'll stay as long as Saka's fit. They just stay, so then it becomes a question of I've got Haaland. Do I trust? I think what might be optimal review seems to be recommending things like Haaland out in 10 for Salah and then Solanke. And then I think I prefer Haaland to Salah at the moment, but then that's why it becomes interesting about that question of those eight mils. Like if you go to Salah, you do get an extra 2.5. You can get a Solanke, maybe even a Havertz. So it becomes interesting, and I don't know the answer yet. I'm going to look at what happens in the next few weeks. But right now, I feel like Saka and Palmer stay for me, and probably Haaland stays. But I'm a little bit worried about City and what they're doing, so we'll have to see about that. So then the answer then for me and my team becomes the transfers are in the other areas, and I want to feel a little bit. It might be luxury, but I want to feel a little bit more confident about those players. So it is potentially someone different sort of strikers, the cheaper strikers. I may have got it wrong with Vardy and Calvert-Lewin. Maybe I want Cunha. Maybe I want that extra money. I possibly do. I like it. The fixtures are really good long term. So for me, and again McNeil and so on. So at the moment, the situation I'm in to end that point is my transfers at the moment is the plan will be spent on the cheaper guys to try and get the ones that I feel more confident in long term. I feel like I can leave them there without having to move around the big pieces or get rid of anyone like Trent, Gabriel, Raya, Palmer, Saka, Haaland. They all stay, and that's where I'm at.
How about yourself, Stu?
I having just wildcarded, my personal position is that I'm actually not hope. I'm hoping to not make any transfers for the foreseeable. The idea was to wildcard into a team which could probably get me through 3 or 4 weeks potentially without making a transfer. I didn't see in this period coming up now any teams apart from City. If you haven't got any City, I would definitely get some in if you know which ones to go to. But I didn't see any real good fixture runs for teams that I had any confidence in. I know that Danny's just mentioned the Everton run, but then I don't like Calvert-Lewin, and I don't have any confidence in any of their assets. So while the fixtures might be good, I don't see any picks that I want from those teams. So yeah, I get the Tottenham fixtures; they're not too bad, and I'm already got Solanke. Yes, Brennan would be nice. I think he's definitely on form at the moment, but I'm not desperate to get him in. If I had an injury, he'd probably be the first one I turn to. But I don't see this fixture period as being one where there's particularly good runs of fixtures for the top teams, and therefore, if I can bank a few transfers and come out of the other side when the fixtures turn for the bigger teams and have that to make the moves, get the Palmer in, etc., I think that'll be more beneficial.
Yeah, that's fine. I think just a kind of a little subtext to that question that we asked as well was about an asset like Eze. I mean, I I think it is an awkward kind of player because I don't ever see really any need to touch that unless you are, I don't know, four transfers deep in the bank and you think, well, I can't really see anything on the horizon. I don't know why you would spend the transfer getting rid of Eze at this point. Now that you've got through the Liverpool fixture, etc., that those games coming up don't look too bad to me. He obviously got a lot of time on the pitch as the sole penalty taker. I think it's fine. I think you leave it. But I mean, if you are completely flushed with transfers, by all means, wouldn't mind if you moved him on, but I don't really see the value. But I agree with you, Pep. I think in our sort of position where we haven't banked many moves, it is a bit more difficult at this point in time.
Would you, looking at the Palace fixtures? Obviously you're saying if you've got SA, there's no reason to move off of him. But would you buy him if you didn't have him? Is it a case of don't sell but don't buy potentially?
Do you know what? Maybe, but I do think people will, and I'm not saying I won't do this because I'll have a think about it, but this idea that if there's a problem, everyone's going to jump on Brennan Johnson, for example. I don't know whether it's quite as simple as that. I don't think there's nothing wrong with anyone doing McNeil now or Smith Rowe now, and you're thinking, well, I'm putting together a little bit of a Palmer bank or putting aside a little bit of money so I can upgrade someone to. I mean, I talk about Bowen all the time. But you might be able to use that money kind of elsewhere. I'd certainly rather do that than go down the route of having to sell Trent to afford what you want. That's just my position on it. So I don't think it's a shoe in that you go for these people. As Danny said earlier, right? He's only been this kind of locked phenomenon on the right hand side, getting chances for a few game weeks. I don't think it's quite such a shoe in. Nice. Right, we're just gonna have a look at our teams. We've chatted away for far too long, and if you stayed with us, then there's probably something wrong with you. But if you are, then that's great. We're going to start by having a look at some of the teams that we have and some of our decisions, and maybe Danny has a track record of trying to persuade Pep into doing something naughty, and then Pep resists, or vice versa. So let's start with one of them. If I can bring up some teams.
Mine's boring. Get mine out of the way, maybe.
Let's do you first then. Okay, hopefully you can see yours. That's Danny. Yeah, so what are you thinking? Is it dependent somewhat on injuries? And I suppose there's still a few internationals to go, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm kind of just hoping / assuming that Saka's okay. You would think he's probably okay, knowing Saka. It's just a Saka injury. But yeah. So that aside, I haven't thought about any possibilities at all if Saka is injured. Um, but I got 2 free transfers, and assuming he's fit, I will be rolling. Um, yeah, team looks good, but it's just a question of then it's just thinking about what happens going forward. Because yeah, like I say, I either just go full suboptimal Sally and make 3 transfers just to change my cheap players around to players I might be happier with long term, which might be okay. Or it's
So
whether I want the
let's
transfers to get rid of Haaland and swap Haaland for Salah or something in game week 10, but I can't see that at the moment.
yeah, let's say we get to next Friday and the noises make it sound like Saka will miss a week. Any thoughts on what you do?
Phil Foden. No, I'm only joking. It could be. It could be Foden. If we get released,
Totally.
might just have to buy a ticket. That's tough. I haven't thought about it at all. I don't like the idea of selling him and using a transfer and wanting to get him back. I can't see myself going to someone like Johnson. I just can't see it, mate. Again, it could be a blind spot. Who jumps out at you? If I think Foden starts, I'll probably just go there. But that would take some seriously reliable info. Um,
I think because you're not that interested in tweaking structure, etc., then maybe you could, as you say, buy a ticket to the lottery, so to speak. It is a difficult situation because a few weeks' time, then it looks very different, doesn't it? I mean, I know every opportunity I get, I extol the virtues of a certain Mr. Bowen. Um, and he's someone in my mind at some point. But nothing. The problem is your situation is that you can't park. It's not easy to park someone on the bench and play Semenyo, isn't it? That's quite a tricky thing to do. So you could even go down the route, couldn't you? Of you bench Saka because you know he's only got a week, and then you turn Semenyo into a McNeil Smith Rowe situation. It's not a terrible idea, but
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. This is the fun thing about talking about it with a week to go. We can all be brave the Friday before a deadline, right? We can all say that we're going to go phone.
And if I did, I'm just looking now, just trying to think because I haven't thought about it for a single second. But when we talk about rolling the dice on Foden, if I let's just say hypothetically I did have to sell Saka, which I don't think is going to happen. But if he's injured for a significant amount of time, then I might consider Bruno as well.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
You know,
because
I know
the
he's been
swing
poor.
the
But
swing
again,
happens now, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's two different types of dice, isn't it? Roll the dice on Foden, yeah, who's good, but his minutes are seriously under threat. He started one game this season, no idea what's happening with him. It's a complete dice roll. Or roll the dice on someone who is the team are crap, but is historically a great player and he's on penalties and he's definitely going to play 90 minutes. That's pretty reasonable to me. So Fernandez might be fun.
Yeah.
Got any money in the bank, Danny?
No, no,
Nothing.
no. 0-0, hence the double Ipswich defence.
If
Yeah.
Saka was out and you wanted to keep him, would you think about changing Semenyo and using him on a short term basis if Saka was out?
You're gonna get me riled up again, Pep, because the only one I'd go to is McNeil, who is I'm now 0.1 off. But obviously they're actually the same
Um,
price, Semenyo and McNeil. But obviously I got Semenyo at 5.6, so
you don't fancy someone like Bayanote for Leicester?
I don't think so. No, obviously these guys might be good, but transfers are precious. So when it comes to a transfer and what is effectively 4 points in the future, I, I'd rather play Semenyo against Arsenal kind of thing. He's a good player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my gut. I wouldn't be spending transfers around there. So hopefully I hold on to Saka. If Saka's out, it gets interesting. Maybe I look at Foden or Bruno or someone else that I've probably forgotten.
I mean, none of that bench is awful. I mean, I don't. I think a few weeks ago, people would have said, "Oh, well, I'll totally fine with playing my Ipswich defender this week." And I do think it is. Leif Davis, by the way, is one of those players that's kind of amused me this season because I can just see us getting to sort of game week 33 where everyone's saying, "But the attacking data is so good." And he's kept sort of one clean sheet or something. But actually, if Ivan's watching eventually, then I apologize for anything I've said there. But yeah, yeah. So that it's not even the worst idea. Let's have a quick look at someone else's team if I can get that up. Just bear with me whilst I sort of find the button. We so far into this now. I forgot my routes to the buttons. Okay, so that's Danny done, and we'll go to Stu.
Uh, okay, so I'm looking to roll as well, as I alluded to earlier. Mine's more a case of which 11 do I put on the pitch? Um, I've got I've got Diaz in there at the moment. I've got a back four at the moment of Trent, Saliba, Gabriel, and Lewis. Mikalenko could quite easily get a clean sheet at home to Crystal Palace. Smith Rowe seems to have got all his returns this season at home to at home. He's at home to Villa, which is obviously not a great fixture. So yeah, it's more about which 11 I put on the pitch rather than which transfer I'm going to make, I think.
Nice.
Can I give
You've got
unsolicited
such a
opinion?
strong squad there, Pep. I mean, really, any of those people on the bench are perfectly fine, aren't they? You could argue the case about Smith Rowe versus Rodgers, couldn't you? I think it's fair to say if there's something. I don't think DS does return that late this time, does he, from Colombia or wherever he is? But
Yeah.
that's another one as well. Milinkovic, I mean, that's a good fixture. Yeah, it's tricky. You've got too strong a squad.
I mean, there's even a world where you could conceivably start all five of those defenders. If Luis Diaz was back from Colombia or some ludicrous time and he wouldn't make the game, or we get team news or whatever. Yeah, I just something could be thrown up. I mean, we don't Havertz is yellow flagged at the moment. I'm presuming that's just an international break injury where he's not really injured at all. But if he was ruled out, I still can't see myself making a transfer. Still think the bench is got cover on it.
If it were me, I'd start Smith Rowe.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the one free transfer.
Who would you play Smith Rowe over there, Danny?
Rodgers.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's more or less how I see it.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty boring to be honest. Not my usual Maverick moves because I'm not making any.
But
Hopefully,
did you get the Pickford 15 pointer last week?
yeah, yeah. Pickford came on
Yeah.
the wild card when I decided that Raya had to go because I wasn't convinced that I wanted to be mucking about with will he start, won't he start when I had no playing second goalkeeper.
Jammy kit. You got some nice players in place there, Pep. So it just looks like an easy role. It's just like you
Yeah,
say, it's just free to play. You've got some nice sort of. You've got that, having Solanke and Havertz gives you the choice of who you want to keep in future if you want to, if you do want to sell one. Milankovic is really nice to have in place. So Smith Rowe, Rodgers, and Bruno. It's really nice.
yeah, but a lot of my midfielders are cheap, aren't they, as well? Which is what we were alluding to earlier. I can't get to a premium midfielder, which is why I'm worried about how I'm going to get to Palmer or Salah or
Just save up the transfers. Looks good. Diaz, Diaz could be good this week.
yeah.
Okay, I guess we'll switch to my lot. Um,
Template FC.
Screw you, young man. Well, as many people would say, right, I made my decisions independently. It's just that everyone else happened to do the same thing. Um, yeah, I mean, it's fine. I haven't really got much to say
No.
on this. I think it starts to become much more interesting if there's a Saka problem, right?
Milankovic, nice pick. Nice pick.
Yeah, do you know what? It's he's a tricky one to because at the moment there's no week to play him, right? But he's just always there, ready to hop in. Um, Listen, I mean, to be honest with you, if I'd had a few more transfers racked up from earlier in the season, I'd be playing this a bit differently. But the truth of the matter is, it is holding water for a little while. I have moves that I want to make later on, but at the moment, unless you are very kind of hot and sweaty on Spurs midfielders, you know, I don't really see the need to do an awful lot there.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. And that's kind of how I see it. I think the big decision would need to be like if Saka was out or projected to be out, then it's interesting because I got zero point 0.4 million back, and obviously I would need to do something in order to get. If I wanted, say, Palmer, then you need to do something in order to achieve that. So it's where you get that money, and let's be honest with you, the obvious place to get it is probably DS. So that would be one of those, that's the issue there. But we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's perfectly fine. I think DS will start and get good minutes against Chelsea. I can't really see a problem there. Is DS against Chelsea significantly different in terms of ceiling or whatever it might be to Brennan at against West Ham? I know it seems obvious last week to people, but I don't know. I don't think it will look like that when we all come back next week. I think it will look about the same. So,
So
All right.
barring injury news, we're all gonna potentially roll.
hmm.
All good.
Maybe, but you know, a week is a long time, and you know, with
Yeah.
injuries and such. But like I say, the thing I'm trying, I've been tinkering around like lots of people do with kind of long-term plans, and the things that I'm fairly certain I'll do is, you know, I want to just, if nothing else, just for the fun of the game, engineer my route to Bowen. And Palmer, it's just a case of when. But I don't mind the idea. I'd rather sacrifice Saka and get Havertz than I would do the Trent thing personally. But that's just it's not on my mind this week anyway. So sometimes you just have to give yourself a bit of breathing space and enjoy the break and let things percolate. But yeah.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
no, sorry, I just said, I've sort of been joking about the Palmer thing and the template thing and this, but it's just the team is really nice. That's the thing what we mentioned about the when you do have a Diaz, which was your whole plan all along. You've got that Solanke position. It looks really nice to have Solanke this week. The home fixture is still just a really good pick.
Big
But
Dom,
we'll just say one final question is I'm just trying to check when the Liverpool fixture is.
Sunday.
Okay, so we're not going to get any news. I was going to say what would you do if Diaz doesn't look like playing, but yeah, he'll probably play. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That is an I don't think despite all I know that again we kind of exist in a there's a little bit of a hive mind thing where everyone congregates towards one or two picks in that midfield bracket, but I don't know. I think it's a little bit of an interesting debate because I think to allow later moves actually does make quite a lot of it does make things a lot easier if you plug in a slightly cheaper midfield in that DS spot potentially. So I don't hate that idea, just because I do have a lot of faith in those. Well, Smith Rowe particularly, but I don't mind saving a bit of money there. But we'll see.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
Nice.
but we shall see. Let's see if I can unscoop that. There we go. Yeah, I think we've probably rattled on for long enough. I know that some of us here are yet to have dinner or whatever it is, so perhaps we can call it quits. But yeah, I mean, nice opportunity to get together. We were gonna have a chat anyway, and we'll put this out there, and people can say nice and nasty things, whatever they like. And perhaps we'll do it again another international break in the future or something.
It's just
Um,
the bit where you have to do like and subscribe. Is that how it works?
yeah,
Yeah.
smash the buttons.
So like and
You know, we'll be in FPL sorry, the FPL studios next week with I don't even know their names to be fair. Jules Breach or whatever it is and that sort of thing. But yeah.
absolutely.
All right, well I'll bid you to enjoy the rest of your week. Any last words? No.
Roll with it.
Roll with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
very topical. Okay, well enjoy the rest of your break and we'll perhaps see you another time.
Yeah.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers, Danny. Thanks a lot.
Junior.